All right, everybody, why don't we do a 7-second stretch? Get up, do a downward dog, be a tree, whatever works for you. Hug the next person. I could use a hug. It's kind of chilly. Should have definitely brought layers. This is a good-looking crowd. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Ooh, my heart is definitely full. Definitely. So my name is Juleyka. I'm a writer for The Atlantic. My beat is criminal justice. So this is the intersection of my life every day. And I have 2 young boys that I'm raising in the United States in 2016. So it's complicated sometimes. And so we're going to try and have a conversation today, and we have 3 very brilliant people with us to help us along. So I'd like to invite Roy L. Austin Jr., Rohkaya Diallo, and DeRay Mckesson to please join us downstage. Let's welcome them. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about them in case you haven't looked them up, but you have your phones, you can look them up right now. It's just incredible to think about that. So Roy, who's the furthest one there, joined the White House. The White House's Domestic Policy Council as Deputy Assistant to the President for Urban Affairs, Justice, and Opportunity 2 years ago. He helps to formulate and implement the President's policies on criminal justice, civil rights, housing, labor, human services, and initiatives like Promise Zones. And he also is tasked with this marvelous new initiative called My Brother's Keeper. So welcome, Roy. Thank you for being here. Everybody knows the blue vest. The blue vest today is being escorted by its owner, DeRay Mckesson, who, as you know, has become a household name thanks to his activism starting during the Ferguson uprisings in response to the death of Michael Brown. And sometimes I joke with him, not with him, about him that there goes, Obama's new BFF. It's just a joke in my house. He didn't know that. But anyways. Now he knows. So you guys see him on television all the time. You see him across your Twitter feed. You see him on Facebook all the time. Because he has become an emblem for many of us for the Black Lives Matter movement. The zeitgeist is ripe for this movement, and he has become its outstanding voices. And one of my favorite images of him was created a couple of weeks ago when he was arrested in Baton Rouge, and many people have looked at that image and compared it to images of Martin Luther King when he was arrested and other icons. And I'm not calling you an icon, not yet. You've got a couple of decades before you get that title. But DeRay has very bravely put himself in harm's way for the sake of the movement, as was very clearly captured by that image. And so it's amazing to have him in the room, and hopefully we'll get to hear from him, and hopefully we'll get to engage from him. And then lastly, bienvenue. That's it, that's all the French I know. This is Rohkaya Diallo. She's a French journalist. She's a writer and filmmaker whose work we just enjoyed. As you saw, she tries to unpack racism, sexism, and injustice with a very French flair. She hosts 2 television shows for BET France, is a contributor to a radio program in France, and appears regularly as a current affairs commentator on French television. She's also an author. I saw her signing books earlier this evening, so hopefully they have them outside up front. Grab a book, get it signed. Today we saw her second to last film. Her next film will be premiering at the Schomburg Center in New York on October 26th. So you still have time to get tickets. And that is called Not Your Mama's Movement. So welcome, Rohkaya. Thank you for being here. Thank you. So first, you don't get to talk yet because it was your film. Impressions.
The obvious impression is that what we're seeing in France and what we see in England is not all that different from what we're seeing here. I mean, it's the same language, it's the same incidents, it's the same anger, it's the same passion, it's the same hopelessness, it's the same everything. So that, that was my impression, is this, it could have been any urban area, anywhere in the United States, both of these incidents.
Right?
And so I'd echo that. And one of the, we were just in the White House. He's in the White House all the time, but he works in the White
See,
House.
Obama's BFF.
I was in the White House the other day talking to President Obama, and one of the things I said to him is that being in Baton Rouge worried me because I had not seen a police department not even pretend to have restraint like that. Except for in Ferguson. And I've been to most of the cities in protest. So most of the departments like pretend a little bit. They're like, they wait for the one water bottle and then they just go crazy. Or they wait for like one person to step in the street. But Baton Rouge was like this place where literally everybody's on the sidewalk, no street is shut down, people are just real chill. The police come up and we're just like, what are the police doing? And then they start snatching people and you're like, whoa, that was intense. But what I said to President Obama is what I'll say now is that it really, Baton Rouge challenges my conception of progress. And these movies also sort of, and I think I'm like one of the more hopeful people in the movement. I think I'm sort of holding down the middle and da-da-da. But I was in Baton Rouge, like, he told me to get in the street, to get out of the street, like I was in the street, and I still got arrested, right? And you look at these, and these movies, again, like I think complicate my idea of progress.
Okay. So, Rohkaya, I'm going to come back and ask you about your process, but can you respond to the second film? Were there echoes for you as a filmmaker?
Definitely, especially because, first of all, I want to thank the festival for showing my film. I'm really happy to share my experience as a Black French woman and the experience of the French activists and the French victims of police brutality and systemic racism. I would like to thank you, Icy Sarah, who picked my film, and that you saw presenting the festival, and Robert Rabin for having founded this awesome festival. So I have been aware of what happened in Tottenham because England is very close to France. So the uprising that were called riots, but to me it's uprising the same way the riots in France were depicted as the uprisings in France were depicted as uprising. But we, as activists, call them revolts because to us it was a way to challenge the system that wasn't fair to people. So I didn't. So I was aware of what happened in Tottenham, but not of the whole process, and the fact that the police officers were allowed to perform an lawful killing. So that's that echoes to what happened last year because the police officer who were involved in the chasing of Zied Benna and Bena Traoré, the two kids who were 15 and 17 chased by the police and took refuge in a power plant, and that's not shown in the film, but they stayed there during 15 minutes. The police even deemed to call the company of electricity to cut the electricity. So there were 3 of them in the power plant, 2 of them died, and we have on record one of the policemen communicating with another police officer saying, if they are in the power plant, I don't think they're gonna make it. It was recorded, and even though they were released last year, after 10 years of trial, because the judge said in the tribunal that if you don't go, as a policeman, you don't go to Clichy-sous-Bois, so the city, as you would go to Brittany. So it's saying that Brittany is mostly a white region of France, and Clichy-sous-Bois is obviously a most colored region of France. So it just shows me that whether you're in Ferguson, in Tottenham, or in Clichy-sous-Bois, the story is always the same because you're a person of color, a brown person, you will be exposed of unfairness and injustices.
Okay, thank you for that. So, Roy, you made the same point, which is that there seems to be a very particular universality to the way that these issues come up. Do you care to expand on that a little bit, please?
I mean, I think it's pretty plain. What we just saw there is every city. I think the thing that really caught me is there's this idea of procedural justice, and this is something that's been talked about a lot lately, and that is that in many of these cities, people don't feel, if they felt that the law was fair, they could accept the results. And I think what I took from this was a more power behind that, and that is the idea that for very small things, the people who live in these cities get caught, they get arrested, they get locked up, they get jailed, everything. And then when you have a police officer who has taken someone's life, they don't see that same process. They don't see, there's this, and so I think that's like that was the thing that pushed me a little bit more in this movie, in these two movies, than I had really thought of before, was just how real the procedural justice is, because it's just the smallest thing. Their lives have turned a corner. The biggest thing here, the taking of a life, and there's this process, and the process 1,500 times turns out that not a single bad shot or bad killing.
Right, it becomes legally justified. So I'd like to actually pick up on to me there was a really good tension in that in some instances in France, for example, it was very particular to a location, essentially the way that Black and brown people are ghettoized, right, geographically. But in the United States, when something happens in Ferguson or in Baton Rouge, it goes like wildfire across the country, right? And people start to organize, and people show up in New York City, right, at Union Square and on college campuses. So DeRay, can you talk to us a little bit about why is it that right now we see, like we haven't in the last 10 years, right, this, the instantaneous nature of organizing? Is it all because of Twitter?
I'm a Twitter evangelist, but as somebody who was there in Ferguson, we knew that people were coming to stand with us. Like, we knew it, we saw it, it was real. We never thought people were going to stand in their own places. Like, that just wasn't, we just didn't know, right? It's one of the reasons why I went to Baton Rouge. So many people came to us, and we said that when it came time to stand with them, we would do it, right? Because people came. I do think that social media has played a big part in us redefining what community looks like and how we build community. If we understand community to be a space where there's shared values and beliefs, and that we can actually have shared values and beliefs without having to be body to body. And I think social media allows that community building. I think we're on the cusp, just at the beginning of seeing the power of that, and I think that's real. I'm also mindful that we aren't born woke, that something wakes us up. And so many of these things have been the awakening for people, right? Like, you see Philando and you're like, people, I remember in the beginning when we were trying to tell people the police are killing people, and they're like, y'all are being dramatic. And we're like, no, I think you're right. And in St. Louis, the police killed Mike, which most people know, but the police killed 10 people after Mike Brown in St. Louis. So we were in the street, we were in the street because of Mike's death. And then everybody else is they killed Kajim 8-9 days later. They killed Bondare right after that. So we were painfully aware, but we would get calls and people were like, I'm so shocked. And we're like, I don't know why, this is happening, right? And then it was Sandra, Walter, and Freddie where people were like, okay, there's a problem across the country. But before that, they were like, there's a problem in St. Louis. And I think what you keep seeing is every new video and every new story, people are like, the trauma is actually much closer to me than I thought it was. And in Baton Rouge, we're in jail. I was there for 17 hours, and it was all these guys who were like, I just didn't know what happened here, right? I didn't know this would happen in mine. And we're like, it's happening everywhere. It's everywhere. But it's not until it actually happens, and people are like, whoa. And I think there is something about social media where people feel like they're part of a community. So in jail, they just would not stop talking about the Atlanta protesters. They were like, the people in Atlanta shut down the highway. That was, everybody in jail was Atlanta. But they felt like a part of it. They felt like the Atlanta protesters were their people.
Even though they were sitting in jail.
Right, they were in jail, but they were like, those Atlanta protesters. And I was like, okay,
All right, so actually that brings me to a really interesting question, because I was fascinated by the notion of adopting Africana History Month. So one of the arguments that I constantly get into is the notion that we have to do PR for ourselves, right? Why do I have to sell you on the notion that I'm just as human as you are? Right? just seems like a really basic question, right? So when I heard the professor in your film say that she had initiated this, that question, of course, came to mind. So can you tell us a little about how it's rolled out, what the impact has been, and whether you really think that it can have an impact in ultimately our concern, which is the unmitigated deaths of Black lives at the hands of police?
So the thing I have to explain is that in France, the country is not aware of the level of police brutality, so the media coverage when it comes to the US is awesome. So you have headlines about Mike Brown, about Sandra Bland, about Tammy Rice, so we know the names of the people who are killed by the American police, but whenever it comes to France, we have no coverage. So we don't know the names of our own Mike Browns and Kajin Powell or whoever, because I have the feeling that the politicians and the media use the US to say, oh, look at them, how racist they are. But us in France, who are so universal, who are so colorblind, we don't have these kind of issues. So Mabula Soumaoro, so the name of the professor, her initiative was to make people aware of the fact that we have issues with racism and at the same time that we have our own heroes. Because we tend to claim Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, or Angela Davis, but we would not claim Frantz Fanon, for example. Frantz Fanon is a French intellectual who inspired even here many activists, but he's not known in France. So we need to, and you saw in the film that Tumi Jaija, who initiated a historical march, isn't known by anyone, even me. I heard of him the first time as an activist, and I met him actually in Morocco. So I was ashamed, and the day the African Americans met him, there were many French activists who were ashamed to discover their own history in that way. So Mabula is trying to push that into the public sphere.
So do you think that this campaign of awareness will actually translate into procedural justices, where maybe people who are selected for juries or people who serve on magistrates, things like that?
I think that it would be more difficult because we don't. So the issue with police brutality is different because we don't have the same. The police is not as does not use guns in the same way. So most of the people who die in the hands of the police, who die in custody or being strangulated in police trucks. So it's much more difficult to have evidences. We couldn't have like iPhone videos because there are only a very few people who die being shot. It's mostly in another way.
Okay, so someone who's a witness wouldn't be able to impact it that way.
There is no witness when you're in custody or in a truck. There are no witnesses, so they would say no, he has killed. Last week a guy died in custody in Marseille, a black young guy, and we have been said that he killed himself.
Right.
So.
Okay, so I'm going to ask one more question of the panelists because I'm sure there are lots better questions in the audience, and I just ask you to not make statements, but to really just ask questions. Okay, so like one line and a question mark. Okay, practice that. You can type that out to yourself if you like beforehand. So I think his name is Marcus in the second film said a line that just really got to me. He said, I've been loyal to something for so long that doesn't care about me. And I've heard this sentiment over and over again. So I just want the three of you guys to sort of chew on that for a second and tell us, how does that translate in your experiences as a French Black woman, in your experiences as an American Black activist, in your experiences as someone who's now in charge of my brother's keeper, who's very involved in showing that the president, that the state, that the government cares? Anybody can go, whenever.
Just quickly, I think that I share the sentiment of Mabula Soumaoro, who said that we have been raised thinking that we were regular French people, and being an adult, you've been shown that everybody would ask you where you're from. How come you speak such a good French? And you're like, okay, because I'm French. But where are you from? home for real? What is your country? And whenever you say the country of your parents, someone will, so my parents are from Senegal, and someone would tell you, oh, okay, I've been to Gabon, to another country, and speak to you about the country that you've never been to forever. So it's this feeling of not feeling and not belonging to the country.
Yeah, that happens. It's me too.
So, well, first of all, I'm not in charge of my brother's keeper. That's Broderick Johnson's job. And
Okay, right.
But I think it's the part of this country where a black man is a black man is a black man. Where, and it kind of feeds off of what she just said. It's why do you speak so well? Speak English so well? Why are you so articulate? It's why a president can be called, can be commended for being so articulate. It's why there's an expectation, even in this country, despite being here so long, despite some achieving, that there is no separation between the educated person and the person who has suffered and had trouble being educated. It is Tim Scott getting up there and talking about his experience being stopped by the police, where suddenly you have a number of people in a certain party suddenly going, oh, even you? And it's like, you realize that it's a universal happening regardless of what one has attained. And that is, that's why I fight. I fight because I have a son, but I also fight because the experiences that I've had are, if I'm dealing with this and I have means to get hopefully out of it, what do people who do not have that means, what chance do they have?
So in your case, is the loyalty not to the country, but to black folks, because they're the ones who are, disproportionately suffering these injustices?
The loyalty is I want my son to be seen as a human being. And until we actually start seeing that humanity in people and not assuming that they are something, that was the other part of these movies is they're just like everybody else. Okay? And I'm just like them. And we say the same stuff and we do the same things, and it cuts across our races, our colors, our everything. But we see color and we don't see the humanity, and that's the importance of, and that's the, I don't know that I'm capturing the loyalty piece of it fully, but that's the fight.
So it's more the loyalty to the notion of our shared humanity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can feel that as a parent. It's one of the ways that I filter. Sort of like, okay, what am I modeling for my child right now, right? Because you've got to fight with all of these, my Bronx tendencies is what I call them. DeRay, please.
I'm generally a hopeful person, and I think about hope as a belief that our tomorrows can be better than our todays. I get though that the system has done real damage, and part of the reason we protest is to call that damage into question and to help people see that is real. I'm also mindful that the power of the government is derivative, right? That that the laws only matter because people follow them, right? That the police only have power because we have given them and we've ceded that power. And I think in protest we call into question the giving of that power, right? It's like a reclaiming in a sense. And I worry because I think there are definitely people in the movement who sort of are pushing for a no government, like a structureless space, right? And I think black people, that does not benefit us. I think the structures are bad, and they barely help us now, but no structures, I think, is not it. And I do believe that we can change structures and systems in a way that actually change culture. And that what comes next in the movement is a real question of, can we be as organized on the inside as we are on the outside? I think that is a real thing. I think an outside-only strategy is a strategy to fight forever. It's not a strategy to win. And I'm mindful of that. And I have a lot of worries in the movement, right? I think that, we met with Hillary, sat across from Hillary, and I say, Hillary, I don't think people are going to vote for the other person. I just don't think people are going to vote for you, right? And I think that there's something about the way this apparatus works is I think they do take for granted a part of that people will just always care. And I think that people are sort of in protest, sort of taking away consent like that. The people who are they're not going to vote, I don't think they're like, I want to screw over America. I think that they're saying, I'm not going to consent to a government that kills people. And like, even if I don't agree with it, I get it, you know? And I think that, and this is what I said, that President Obama was a little annoyed with me that last meeting, but what I said to him, one of the things I said is, President Obama, I really worry about the way you talk about voting, because you offer voting as like, if you don't vote, you don't care.
Right.
As opposed to voting as like one of the ways you can show you care. And people choose to vote, right? That it's like one tool, and he was, I had this whole list of the way he talks about things. He was annoyed with me, but I think that is like real, and I think that there are people who want to like push the protesters or activists or young people to be invested in the system, who are not acknowledging like the way people are choosing to divest from the system.
Yeah, I actually have seen more and more people just sort of say, I am consciously choosing not to vote. They haven't expressed it as well as you have, but basically to say, because I'm just adding my vote to say I'm okay with the system not working. And so there seems to be a lot of a consciousness racing around that. But all right, let's open it up. First person in the back. Hello. Oh, good, we have a mic. Thank you.
I just want to continue that point that you just discussed on the voting, and ask you then the follow-up question of, if you divest yourself, as you put it, from the vote, and I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but I'm just curious as to what are the other options, because as you know, the protest movement is under some pressure right now in terms of next steps and what those steps are going to be, et cetera, and social media is powerful, so how are you going to leverage it?
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's not my strategy, but I think that is like I think that is some people's strategy. With Hillary and Trump, I think that the reality is like Hillary can't win or govern without black people, and Trump can do both, and I think that that is scary, right? I think that there is what the Clintons can do is that the apparatus is already built. Obama didn't have an apparatus, he had to build it, right? The Clintons will come on the first day and be ready to go, right? So if black people aren't organized, she'll just be quicker than the best organizers are right now. And I think that should worry people, for the people who are worried. But I think there's some people who want to withdraw their vote, have this idea of a productive apocalypse. Like this idea that the system will come to a grinding halt, and in the grind, people will figure it out and will come to freedom, whatever that looks like. I am nervous about that version of the world, but I do think people offer that as a legitimate, people believe that. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question actually for Roy, because, sorry, you're gonna speak for the White House. Just this question. The government seems to be trying to be more inclusive. Even Congress now has an official caucus dedicated to black women and black girls. So from looking from the administration out, do you think that some of the gains within the structure that exists are sustainable regardless of who comes into the government?
No.
Please elaborate.
No, and I think this is something that President Obama has been trying to say repeatedly, and that is that change is extremely slow. And if you look at kind of where we started with President Obama and the recession that we were in, and really kind of building our way out of there, that unfortunately there are people who do not see that change. And I come from the Civil Rights Division. I saw what happened to the Civil Rights Division under a prior administration. And all the gains that were made were destroyed. And I fear that that is what happens again, and that what we need is in many ways to build on so many of the gains that have been made so far. And so I don't think it doesn't matter who's there. But at the same time, I also understand that for many of those people, what they see are the numbers. And the numbers are pretty much every year, regardless of who is in office, 1,000 to 1,200 people die at the hands of the police.
Yeah, 564 so far this year.
And I think that's the problem, is the incremental gains that we have made in many areas. I know that we've done a lot of stuff in schools, and we've made some serious gains in schools. I think police are starting to take up the idea that they have to do much better than they're doing, but it's not going to happen in 8 years. And my concern is we need more time. and that's the only way we're really going to start
Okay.
having the impact we need to have.
Well, Rohkaya, can you speak a little bit about, because even I was impressed when France put in a black woman as Minister of Justice. I literally had a day. I was like, I'm gonna go buy some French wine, I'm gonna get some smelly cheese, we need to celebrate this, people. So, I'm being facetious, obviously, but has that victory, which is a very big symbol for many people, has that actually translated in, sort of like down tier changes?
Obviously, it's a big symbol, so it has impacted as a symbol. But Christiane Taubira was targeted by many racist slurs. So she has been called a monkey. She was sometimes to a rally where a kid gave her a banana, say in front of her parents, saying "It's for you, monkey." And the government, it took some time to the government to support her. So it has been difficult for her, and actually she left the government in January because further to the attacks, the government has installed a state of emergency that was lasting very, very long. And they wanted to install a law to strip, to install the possibility to strip the French who had foreign origin from their citizenship. So she left the government for that. And
She left in protest.
Yes. So she does not support the policies of the government anymore. But still, it has changed something to have that woman being the face of the Minister of Justice. But it's only a symbol. She has not been able to do what she wanted to do. The policemen who were the reason for the death of Ziad Debouna have been released as she was the Minister of Justice. So she couldn't do it. There was nothing that she could do. Actually, she tweeted about Mike Brown, but she was not able to say anything.
The case of
Yes,
France.
yes.
Wow, that's incredible. All right, one more question, ma'am. You with the curls.
I just have a general question, more for the audience.
You ready, y'all?
And for me, for things to change in each aspect, it comes down to the dollar.
You have to speak up, speak up.
It comes down, for real change, it comes down to the dollar, that money talks.
Then money talks. And around Christmas time, we'll say we're going to have a whole week's boycott, but that doesn't mean anything. What was in the second film, there were all these logoed clothing that all these kids were wearing. And I'm like, all right, if this whole population just decided to boycott buying from these corporations, that if we just stop buying these our wants instead of just necessities, would that be a louder voice than anything else? That you're not going to take us for granted because the billions of dollars the people of color have in the United States, so we would have an impact on the general economy. And
Fair question. So, can we leverage our dollars to put corporate pressure on government? Right? That's the formula, question mark. Anyone?
I don't think it's gonna work the way it did before.
Okay, we have a no in the back. Anybody want to argue?
I would put that question to DeRay and the movement that they have done, and I know at one point, and I don't know if you were involved in the Magnificent Mile protests in Chicago. There have been repeated attempts over the years to try to do the economic protest. And I think it has always kind of struggled because at the end of the day, I mean, the simple one that comes to mind is Chick-fil-A. I mean, people thought they were protesting Chick-fil-A, and Chick-fil-A was doing great
Yeah,
business.
but they have God behind them.
So, anyway.
I think that,
I asked DeRay.
we get this a lot. We worry about this idea of tiering tactics, right? That like, the only real way to get free is economics, right? Or the only real way to get free is by standing in the street, or because we would say that the tactics change by the context. So like we could have boycotted the mall or anything in St. Louis, and it would not have created the same kind of crisis as us standing in the street and just like, disrupting every type of everything did. and we complicate this notion of sort of the economic impact by thinking about property too. So, not that there's this great article that you should read. I get a lot of flack for it every time I talk about it, but it is an interesting article called In Defense of Looting. Because what he says, not that I'm a pro-looting advocate, if any of you work for Fox News, but what he says is that if the QT in St. Louis had not burned, then nobody would have cared, because the way that property functions in the American psyche is always protected in a different way, right? So he complicates the sort of boycott notion and says that the threat to property is a uniquely American way of whatever. Which I think is interesting. With that said, people now are much more all about a boycott. I get celebrities are trying to do stuff. If you saw Solange just put out the thing about black banks, right? And there are a ton of people trying to organize it. We're trying to figure out, the hard thing with the boycott is that people are don't buy so-and-so, and then there are a lot of people who can't do that, right? That actually becomes a luxury for some people to be able to not buy anything for 5 days. I think Baltimore is probably the closest to a beautiful boycott and protest, when the curfew was at 10 o'clock and everything was closed. The gas stations were closed, everything was dark in Baltimore, and the city lost a lot of money. Or it was the Orioles game was the first game in Major League Baseball history with no audience, right? They lost a ton of money during the protest. And trying to think about, is there a way, or even in Baton Rouge, they decided not to shop at the mall in Baton Rouge, and nobody went to the mall, and the sales were so low they closed it, right? And can we do that stuff? I think that there's a real option. I worry, as somebody who has I have a big platform in the movement, and we get a lot of calls about organized boycott. I think that to organize one that doesn't have an impact actually does more damage to the movement than to just wait. So we've been trying to wait for the moment we think it actually is gonna work, because we are worried that we do this big sort of call and it's questionable impact.
All right, last question before I ask one question about what's going on next week. Yes, the lady in the white jacket in the back.
One of the things that I've been really curious about as I have reflected, especially over the events of last week, is what are the opportunities to actually engage the police? I mean, boycotting corporations or malls, and I think those are different tactics, but I mean, the urgency is really understanding how can we better train and engage the police so they actually stop shooting us, right? I've actually had a conversation with a Washington police officer about this, and there's a code blue, and in many cases, police are reprimanded for speaking out against the force, or even other departments in different parts of the country. But is there a way that we, or even, and I address you, DeRay, specifically, is there a parallel movement where retired police or police unions or people who actually can get to the police, that we can work together to solve this issue, that it's not sort of a us against them? How do we intersect?
Okay, well, I'm actually going to ask Roy to take it first.
So the president created something called the Task Force on 21st Century Policing, which has about 59 recommendations covering everything from implicit bias training to crisis intervention training to de-escalation training to officer safety and wellness. And I think it's incredibly important that everyone take that document and hand it to their mayor, their city council, their police chief, and ask them what are they doing about that. I think that is part of the conversation. There are 18,000 police departments around the country. We need every single one of them to take a close look. But the one piece of it that I feel it has particular power is the data piece of it. So we right now have to rely on the Washington Post and the Guardian to determine how many people are actually killed while they are in custody. And that's a problem, and I know that we're trying to do things to work on that. But with data and with real information comes real power. And we don't have that in the criminal justice system. We're still counting things that are years old and not really counting them in a way that is meaningful. If we push more people to be more transparent, more police departments to be more transparent about who they're stopping, when they're stopping them, what are the results of those stops, who's getting convicted of crimes, looking at our entire criminal justice system and making it more transparent, I think then we have an argument that is more than just anecdotal, and I think that's part of the problem right now is our arguments are so anecdotal. And then the other piece I would just throw out there is in addition to Twitter are just body cameras and more cameras. As the president actually said at one point, he said, folks are not making this stuff up. And for the first time, those who have experienced racial profiling are now able to see it on camera and really evaluate it for themselves. And I think we see different reactions now when we have a lot of these incidents on camera, because people can't turn their eyes away from it, can't say, oh, we don't know what happened, because you see it and it turns your stomach. And so those are the two pieces that I think, the data, the body cameras are two pieces that I think are incredibly important.
Okay, I'm actually gonna put Rohkaya on the spot and ask her, are people, young people, especially in France, using social media and phones in the same way that we do here?
Phone, it's more difficult, but they have been using social media for a very specific French question, because in France you can be, when you're out, your ID can be checked by the police for no reason. So most of the people who are checked are blacks and Arabs. So if you are Arab, you are 8 times more likely to be checked than if you're white, and if you're black, it's 6 times. So we have started a campaign, online campaign, using social media and like YouTube to ask to many very famous hip-hop artists to tell about their first ID check in the streets. And it has been seen online millions time. And we use that to try to pressure the government to imply a policy against racial profiling. And social media have been quite useful for us, but also to connect with activists in the US, to watch what was going on here. And there is even a group that is called Mckesson in Paris that is trying to connect the French experience to the American experience. And I invited last year a group from Mckesson in Paris to share what we were going through. So to me, it's a way to use social media and to understand that this issue is global. It's not only here, not only in France, but also at a global level. And to connect not only to the UK, but to Germany, to even other countries where you don't even know that there are black people, like Poland or Moldova. It's very important to connect in this way.
Thank you. So, DeRay, you get the last question. Wait, I haven't asked yet. No, that question has been answered very sufficiently. So wait, guys, in the next 2 weeks, we have, what do we have? Conventions. What's the plan, Sam, for the conventions? What do we need to get ready? What can we expect to see? What are the goals?
So, okay, I'm gonna quickly say something about the police. Is the police have to, so what was interesting about the last White House meeting is that there's a ton of police chiefs, like the police chief, the state police chief in Louisiana, and the Baton Rouge police still have my book bag, and I did ask him for my book bag back.
The president asked for your book bag back.
I know, I was like, that was his being nice to me, because he was mad at me for the rest of the day. But again, the police, in that room, there was a police chief in a major city who was like, we've done all these reforms, and we've tried all these things, and our police are still killing people, right? And it, like, though I still struggle with his police department, like, he would never say that in public, but it was actually, like, finally the police are like, okay, something's wrong. Whereas in public, they just, like, double down, and they're like, well, this is the way it is, and you're like, that is just not it. So the police have to show, like, I think the protesters have actually done a remarkable job, given the fact that the police keep killing people, of, like, showing up in spaces, like, where the police are present, and the police don't always sort of meet us there, right? And I would say, if there's any sort of troubling part of the policing, it's like the unions just like are the least. I'll give the police way more credit than I'll give the unions. The unions are like just not, they have moved almost not at all. The head of the IACP, that guy, he gets it. And like it's like the international, what is it?
Association of Chiefs of Police.
The guy who's the International Association of Chiefs of Police, he gets it. Like he gets it, he was good. I'd never met him before, he should talk more. But the police union people, it's so shaky, and like they have to show up. So I don't think the onus is on the movement per se. I do think the onus is like on the police to show up a little bit. And when he talked about the laws, you know, the courts have rarely said the police were not involved in the killings. They have said that the involvement is not criminal, right? And we remember that is actually a call for us to change the laws. It's not saying the police were not responsible. And that the police actually have to like own a part of that, right? So you think about what does it mean in Louisiana where the police have 30 days before they make statements, in Baltimore where they have 10 days, right? That's not fair. The conventions, I don't know anybody going to Cleveland. Reporters call me every day being like, DeRay, who's in Cleveland? I don't know. Trump is in Cleveland. I don't know why you would protest in Cleveland. He will be the nominee. I don't think anything's good gonna come out of Cleveland, including the nominee. Like, I'm not going. I don't know anybody going besides the people that live in Cleveland. Philadelphia, I think people will go. I think that what is interesting about Philadelphia will be that Congress just sat in, as you all saw, I'm sure. So I am fascinated to see what the DNC is going to do with the protesters. And I know people who are going to protest just to see what the DNC is going to do, because the DNC will not be able to do this whole thing of protest doesn't matter, protest isn't good, when John Lewis and them are sitting on the floor of Congress. So I'm interested. I can't wait to see that. And then I think people will continue to press for some policy changes. I do think that the DNC was smart by making this platform even more progressive than I thought it'd be. I mean, they've covered a lot of ground. So I think that people will protest to continue to push them. And I do think, and this is, I've said very little publicly about the nominees, or definitely Democrats, but I think people question Hillary's sincerity at a very deep level. And I think people will protest philosophically to show her that even though she will be the nominee, that they will not be quiet. And again, as somebody who sat across from Hillary, I worry sometimes that her team, whether she believes it or not, thinks that this is going to be a simple thing. And I think that people might, in droves, just say, I'm not going to do this, right?
You mean I'm not gonna vote?
I'm not going for her, which I think is which is not helpful. I don't think that is, I think a Trump presidency is scary. And I was somewhere with somebody, I can't remember his name, but he said that if Trump wins, the damage he'll do trying to undo it will be like trying to unring a bell. And I think that is real, right? And I worry about that. With Hillary, I think that again, we'll just need to be really organized, and she has an apparatus that she can mobilize on day one, which I think we have to prepare for.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Kaya. Thank you, DeRay. Thank you, Roy. Thank you, audience.